Hello, everyone. Let's tune into this upcoming Mars-Pluto opposition. Pluto and Mars come into opposition on January 2nd at 1 degree Leo Aquarius. This is the second of three oppositions. Soon thereafter, Mars will move back into Cancer. And then in a few months, Mars will come back into Leo for the third opposition with Pluto. We're in this evolutionary process of Mars and Pluto going in and out of this opposition. It's a very powerful one. This is the retrograde one. This is a very instigating, a very deep, very soulful evolutionary process. And I want to share two preliminary notes. One, in virtue of the fact of Mars moving back into Cancer quickly after this opposition, says we're in a very focused phase of this journey right now during this week. The energy is really intense, but it's going to shift into a different phase, a different ecosystem. But then we're going to come back later next year to bring this to completion. In fact, it's only after the final opposition, when Mars begins to separate far beyond the opposition, that we'll begin to see it actually play out and clarify in time. So being in an evolutionary window fundamentally means, and this is just like the nature, the essence of Mars and Pluto, that to evolve, our perception and our sense of our reality and what's going on and where we're going and what choices we can make and what's possible is limited. We can say is wrong, meaning we don't have a full, clear, accurate grasp of it, because the solutions that Caterpillar can possibly work out are simply not going to reach the perceptual reality of a butterfly. So in being in this evolutionary window, we have to appreciate we can't really rely so deeply on what we've known. We can't depend so deeply on the thresholds of security and power that we've established, because that's going to keep us limited. It's going to keep us not in our greater potential, not in our greater power. We want to be willing to evolve. And so the fundamental ground here is the desire to evolve. Whatever challenges and circumstances are present in our life, and we all have our own challenges, the desire to evolve is fundamental, because it says there's another way. There's a way of meeting the challenges and the circumstances and the content of my life in a way that actually leads towards growth, not more fighting, not more tension, not more fear. And I think evolution and the actual experience of evolution itself is a matter of grace. Like, we can't make ourselves evolve. We create the internal state of readiness. We practice our thinking. We tend to our thoughts, and thus to our actions. We take responsibility for what we can take responsibility for. We prepare the ground, we prepare the temple, but there's something that happens that's beyond us that we can't affect. And it's helpful to appreciate that, because times like these, as signified by a very strong Mars-Pluto opposition, we might find ourselves stuck. We might find ourselves challenged or confronted with dimensions of life experience that we just don't know how to solve it. We don't know how to move through it. As per Mars and Pluto, where's our power? Where's our sense of entitlement and freedom to act, to create, to live, to self-actualize? Do we feel entrapped? Do we feel stuck? Do we feel like we're being limited in some essential way? And we're going to define all the particular elements of this and go really deeply into this. I just wanted to start with this essential introduction, because being about evolution, we just have to appreciate we never, ever, ever know where we're going to go and what's there and how good it actually is and how much better it is, really, until you get there. So let us not limit the potential. There's a friend of mine recently shared, he had the thought, this is doable. This being like this, this. It's doable. You're here. I'm here, we're here, it's doable. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. Okay, with that basic introduction offered, let's delve into this teaching. I'm going to be reading and riffing off of an article that I wrote. This article will be soon sent out in my next newsletter. So if you'd like to receive the newsletters that I often write in tandem to these videos, you can subscribe to that. It's in the description below. A couple other announcements. My Planet Square in the Nodes series, we're about halfway through. We will resume on January 7th with our next class on Saturn. So you can enroll in any individual class, or you can enroll in the entire series. Lastly, I will soon be opening enrollment for my 2025 training program. So stay tuned for that. We begin in March of next year. If you'd like to start with the study content now, you can always jump in on the self-study, study at your own pace, and then join the live program when we begin in a few months. All right, all of this in the description below. So let's get started with today's teaching. When we think about Mars in Leo, in its most basic sense, and just think of this in terms of Mars moving between Cancer and Leo. This is a very personal energy, right? Cancer is about security, family, tribe, belonging. Leo is about purpose, self-actualization, the entitlement to live here. It's like you have your family, you have your kids. Like that's Cancer, Leo. On a national level as well, you have, this is my national security. I take pride in my identity. This is who I am. I want to make sure that me and my people, or my religion, or my group, or my tribe, or my nation has the freedom to actualize and live our potential. So we can think of that Mars in Leo and the Cancer Leo energy on all scales in terms of just our sense of I'm here, I'm secure, and I have a right to exist and to live as a free creative being. You bring this into opposition with Pluto, we have all kinds of dynamics that says you have a right to exist and so does everyone else. Now what happens when certain people are saying I have a right but you don't have a right? And all the different dynamics that can express through that. So here we're looking at courage. When entire groups of people are being persecuted or dismissed by the mainstream, it often just takes one person to take a stand to fight for the collective good. This could be a leader that the masses will look up to, as much as it can be just one person taking a heroic stand as a freedom fighter. Now, on the one hand, this kind of activism can be charged or catalyzed by a very strong collective movement of people who are all becoming progressively radicalized by an existing injustice. And we see this all over the world. And it really just takes, one person to throw the first brick for then entire groups of people to follow suit. There's a sort of momentum in groups, and that Leo energy can be sort of this fire, this inspiration that maybe just one person brings forward to say, yeah, we're all excited about this. So here we are looking at masses of people being charged and catalyzed to act in the ways that they perceive as noble, just, and valiant for the sake of the common good. Aquarius correlates to the idea of a social contagion, in the sense that elements of liberation will often arise in various parts of the world, catalyzed by their own local events, but all concurrent to one another in time, right? It's like different parts of the world will have these different revolutions occurring, all springing up at the same time, different causes, but the same archetype, the same energetics. We've seen this historically as well. Certain innovations or technologies or developments of humanity have often been known to develop in parts of the world that we don't even think had any kind of contact with each other, because these are energetics that are simply emerging and liberating at that time collectively. So here's the next piece here. The issue with this kind of radicalization is when it quickly and justifiably moves into anything will justify my actions. They're bad. They're oppressing me. Look at what you've done. Look what they're doing. Look, right? Or look what you are doing to me. It's very easy to become arrogant, prideful, and self-entitled. And this sense of justification grows, of course, as more people join the movement. Not all rebellions are clear-minded, but most of them do usually feel right in the moment. And the same thing is, you can find groups of people that will validate any kind of prideful, arrogant response. Oh, show them, what you're worth and ignore them, or don't answer their calls, or you can counsel them. They said that to you. It's very easy to feel very justified and valid in just sort of doubling down on a prideful sense of, this is what I deserve and you don't deserve that. And for that to be validated by other people and groups of people that all share that. I like to say there's a meme and a popular cultural accepted norm for every level of consciousness, for every state of perception. You just got to Google to find it. You just got to find the right groups and you'll find, finally, this is where I belong. It's very easy if we want it for our ego to be very validated and included. Now this leads to the next piece. When we justify ourselves, it's very easy for other people to become unimportant it's. In my recent class on Uranus square the nodes, which is available for purchase, I use Adolf Hitler as an example as someone who has Uranus square in the lunar nodes. In contemplating his chart, I found myself asking the question, how did Hitler manage to rally an entire country to join him and actively participate in killing millions of humans, including children? How? It's unbelievable to imagine otherwise normal German citizens doing the unthinkable. How did he manage to paint an image of Jews and other minorities as a sort of subhuman class of people that deserve to be completely eliminated? He succeeded in appealing to the most disempowered, alienated, and disenfranchised of the post-World War I German experience. In doing so, he very carefully and patiently led the masses to see the Jews as the problem, as a thorn in the stabilization and the peace of Germany. The German identity, our strength as a nation, can be clarified and strengthened if we can get rid of the Jews. The Jews and the elimination of the Jews would be the only solution to the German identity. And doesn't that feel very Leonian and Cancer by its very nature, right? There's something that is breeding a sense of insecurity in our homeland. Let's be proud of who we are, right? And get rid of that other group that isn't important. That's kind of a bothersome issue. And this is a Uranian Aquarius dynamic. We can abstractly see another as an it, something that is not the same or a part of us. And we can do that to suppress parts of our own being, which is always like the bottom line teaching here, right? These are parts that we don't want to integrate as much as we can do that to entire groups of society. Once we've diminished our perception to an oversimplified projection of itness, there is no longer any humanity in the picture. We no longer can see someone or someone's as deserving as a much valid and meaningful human experience as we are. They are the thing that gets in the way of our sovereign right to live our fullest life. Too many nations have self-entitled themselves to follow their higher destiny, to become actualized, which has happened here in the United States, but so often to the detriment of those other people who apparently do not deserve that as well. And it's always going to be justified. Very seldomly will we find evil overtly expressing itself in the form of what looks evil. It's always going to be intellectually justified and strengthened in the group identity. This dynamic is happening today in Israel and in Gaza, while thousands of people in Gaza are dying and undergoing unspeakable suffering. I want to speak to this. This is one of my criticisms, not of Zionism itself, because there are actually many different forms and pathways and branches of Zionism, but the essential attitude of the early Zionist movement, which continues unto this day. The movement justifiably, understandably, sought a safe homeland for the Jewish people. Who could argue with the validity of that seeking after the long-standing context of European anti-Semitism? What the movement did not adequately do, however, is simultaneously hold and honor as equally important the dignity and the right of the Arab people of that land as that of the Jewish people. Early Zionist Martin Buber, and I shared this in a recent video, himself an Aquarius, and he was a strong advocate for establishing right relations with the local Arabs. And he spoke up against this issue very strongly, where many of the early settlers, even before the Holocaust, there was a sort of dismissive attitude towards the Arabs. We want to create a place for ourselves, but not adequate attention on, hey, this is already a place for you. I want to make sure I got what I need and that I can actualize and come into my greater potential. But when we don't hold awareness of the other people and wish for the same for them, we create big issues. So unfortunately, the early founders of the State of Israel did not share Buber's sensitivities. And there are branches of Zionism that were very militant by their very nature. Some were more socialistic. But the core of it was, we as a Jewish people need a place for ourselves. And I think Herzl even wrote somewhere something to the likes of, if the Jews have a homeland, that'll cure anti-Semitism entirely. Let me express this idea, and this is a very important concept before I continue on in exemplifying this point, which is a very important point. There's a very common dynamic, and I've seen this hundreds or thousands of times. It's just my astrological practice. In our evolutionary journey, we're going to be trying on different archetypes from different angles. It's a part of the evolutionary journey of exhausting our desires and orienting within towards our soul and actually evolving. In that process, we'll go from one extreme to another, often. So you can think of the Mars energy here. Let's say the Mars and Leo energy. Humiliation, being weak, being bully, being disempowered, right? That Mars, Leo, Aquarius energy can very much be, the oddball kid who's being bullied and isn't accepted, isn't included, no one likes, and isn't very strong. That can generate the desire, I want to be strong, right? For over, almost 3,000, 2,500 years, the Jewish people haven't had a military, right? They haven't had a defense system. They haven't been strong people. They've been the minority. They've been the persecuted people. All right, let's get strong. Let's create security. Let's strengthen ourselves. And yet it's easy then to fall into the other extreme. So let me continue reading here and I'll further express this. As a Jew, speaking to these dynamics is an unpopular stance in some circles. My aim here is not to alienate, but actually to heal the alienation. Alienation simply means that some part of the whole isn't being acknowledged or included. And that's what I'm doing here. Now consider that the Israeli Independence Day, the celebrated day that Jews finally established their own homeland after 2,000 years, is also the same day for Palestinian Arabs as the Nakba. The Nakba is the day where over 700,000 Palestinian Arabs were either forcefully expelled or by necessity fled from their homes. Hundreds of thousands of refugees were created. Many of these people have been living on this land for generations. Many Arab villages were completely destroyed. Further, in the establishment of a Jewish state, the right of return for Palestinian refugees and their descendants was completely rejected, all the while implemented for Jewish people. Consider that. A state is created. Now, we can argue it was legal, and there are all kinds of things we can argue. And that's actually not where I'm wanting to go in this, but I'll state these things, right? This is an example to me of where the mind can easily sort of rationalize and sort of separate ourselves from humanity and from our own humanity. Well, it was given to us by the UN Declaration. Well, then the Arabs declared war, and we won more land from the war. We didn't start the war. And we've had that happen several times, 1967, 1973, and so forth. And yet, if we stay in that argument, we're not going to acknowledge, man, here you are, a family that's been living here. You planted those, your great-great-grandfather planted those trees. Now you don't have a home. Well, we won it, so you got to go. That attitude. I don't care who wins. You have a fight with someone. I don't care who started the argument. This is, a learning for me. For all of us, probably, if we're honest with ourselves. How often do we get stuck on the negative behavior of someone else? Oh, you started it. But then we fall into negativity and we lose respect. We stop respecting them. We allow our mind to fall into a degrading state. And at that point, it doesn't really matter what narrative we have of how things began or who started what or why this is entitled or why that is entitled. We're all entitled to deserve the same thing. And if we think that we're better than someone else and that someone else isn't, we should really look at that. And this is the main point that I'm bringing forward here. Just to consider that in this creation of the state of Israel, Jews have a right of return, but Arabs don't. Just that alone. You're an Arab. You're a Palestinian Arab. You have ancestry on that land. But you don't have the right to, and you're a refugee, right? You're a refugee now living in Gaza. Many people in 1948 were displaced. Many of them went to Gaza. But you can't ever become an Israeli citizen. Your relatives from other parts of the world can't move to that land and become a citizen too. So this is what happens. It becomes, I'm important, me and my people are important, but you and yours are not. I think it says something that I never learned about the Arab Nakba growing up. A little bit less than 1 million people were displaced. I never learned about that. I did learn about the Israeli Independence Day. This is about we're never going to get out of this mess until we care about others as much as we care about ourselves. And unfortunately, and we all know this from personal arguments, we get into an argument, we start seeing the other person as fundamentally unsafe, and it's proven to us. They become unsafe. Their egos might act out and do harmful things. What do? Once another person is an enemy, what else are you going to do other than defeat them or create strong walls of defense? I cannot stress enough how this polarity can emphasize a very strongly justified sense of us versus them or me versus you. Now, what we perceive as a problem is a determinant for what we will do to solve said problem. And in that sense, a human mind, especially when joined by large groups, can dismiss anything at all. We need to be very careful of our own projections and how easy it is to lose our essential humanity. And so the shadow of the signature is, I'll win and I don't care about you. So what's the healing invitation in all of this? I think the golden rule is the answer. Love your neighbor as yourself. Even Jesus said, love your enemy. Let's think about that phrase. How do you love your enemy? That's antithetical. Obviously, if you love your enemy, they're not your enemy. Your enemy is someone by your very nature that you see as someone that's a threat. An enemy is unsafe. An enemy either needs to be defended against, protected against, or destroyed. So if you're loving your enemy, you're shining light on the darkness. You're dissolving the enemy. The more deeply we look within, the more we find that our path is less against or in opposition, and more so an expression of our innate freedom to live, share, love, and be more purely and truly as we are created to be. This is a call to liberate our unique, innate creative potential and express it in the world, all the while being committed to the best for others. It's where our freedom and actualization is a blessing for others. It's not a confrontation or challenge. But the challenge is then where we might see a strong threat. If anyone here is a parent, you'll know this. One child's playing, another child comes along and wants to play with the toys. For the first child, that could feel very threatening. I'm playing, I'm having fun, I'm in my own creative imaginational place, and here you are getting in the way of all of that. So we'd say, oh, go and share, and that can feel very, what's the word? Disengaging for that child. Okay, I'll share, fine, right? They lose some of their energy, they lose some of their joy. I have to share, so I'm gonna share, but I don't really want to. Right? Well, I have to give them some land, but I don't really want to, but okay, fine, just to humor them, to get them off, right? It's not real sharing. And the other option is, well, just protect and defend, kick, fight, push back. This is mine. Neither extreme feels peaceful. So what do we do? And again, the answer lies beyond the threshold of what we've known ourselves to be. How do we treat others as ourselves when our perceptions of being threatened are so very strong? Perhaps where our thoughts are strongly identified with perceptions of adversity and threat is more an indication of where such perceptions are being cleansed, where the mirror of our mind is being healed and corrected. This as opposed to our thoughts being an indication as to the validity of our perceptions. There's a creative possibility where we all belong. But the fluidity of mind, the openness, the creative openness to see something different can only happen when we're willing to see differently fundamentally. And to interpret these moments of feeling threatened as opportunities for healings is a very powerful and essential starting point. Yet the stronger our personal attachments to specific object focus, the more fixed our perceptions will be. And the more emotionally vulnerable we will be to that which seems to threaten the continuity of that which we are attached to. The things that's being cleansed fundamentally are personal desires. I need this. I'm defined by this. I need that. I want that. Who are you without that? Well, I'm not going to have what. Who are you without that? Is that true? A part of this journey is realizing in our power, to know our greater power, we can actually let go of more. Our safety is actually in our defenselessness. The more fear there is, the more we will feel that there is to protect. There's a common saying with the Holocaust, never again. And the question is, how do we make sure history doesn't repeat itself? Usually when we think of history not repeating itself, whether it's personal or collective, we'll say, I'm going to make sure that what happened to me or us will never happen again. Right? No one's going to ever treat me that way again. We'll establish stronger defenses. We'll be more guarded. We'll make sure me, myself, my family, my possessions, more protection, more guards, more control, more fear, right? And that creates a sense of sort of security because we're clear we're not going to get walked on ever again. But actually, it doesn't actually heal our minds. We're still very vulnerable, and it requires a lot of control and protection to not be vulnerable. I would like to say that the way for history not to repeat itself is not by making sure that what happened to you never happens again, but rather resisting the temptation to do unto others that which was done unto you. Because inevitably, the opportunity will come to treat another with non-respect, to be violent towards another, to disregard another person's humanity because finally I got mine. Ah, I can get it now. Oh yeah, well, I don't care about you because I got what I needed. That's the real challenge. That is actually where we as humans are most tempted to be blind and unaware of ourselves and how we're treating one another. Again, looking at counseling and many charts over many years, we are blind to that shadow because it's easier to feel victimized. The problem is out there. How can I protect myself from the problem out there than to really clean our own mind? Than to really want to truly authentically purify ourselves and evolve and grow. Pride will always put up the hand and say, I'll never be with someone who treats me like that. I'm never gonna put up with this abuse, right? But power will say, I know what it's like to be treated that way. I will not belittle myself and my own dignity by allowing my mind to stoop ever into a degrading and dehumanizing state. I am committed to treat others the way I know I deserve to be treated. I deserve better, and so does everyone else. I think we only affirm what we believe we deserve by way of how we treat others. I'm speaking to evolution, that we really can't make ourselves evolve, and yet we can give grace to others by not judging them, by granting them in our hearts, in our actions, in our thoughts, in our words, a permission to live, to be who they are as they are designed to be. In granting that, we give ourselves this permission, and we taste and experience what it's like to live and embody that permission. I think how we treat others is one of the most powerful teachings here. All right, that's the teaching for today. Thank you so much for watching.